Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Alfainur Azizah. My ID student number is 201101006014. So in this video, I would like to explain about problem in translation text. First, problem of equivalent. Idiom, for example, English and Italian. But English and Italian have corresponding idiomatic expression that render the idea of prevarication, and so in the process of interlingual translation, one idiom is substituted for another. That substitution is made not on the basis of the linguistic element in the phrase, nor on the basis of corresponding or similar image content in the phrase, but on the function of the idiom. And next is there are four types of translation equivalent. First, linguistic equivalent is homogeneity on the linguistic level of the source language and target language text. Second is paradigmatic equivalent. Paradigmatic equivalent is equivalent of the elements of paradigmatic expressive access. Third is stylistic equivalent. Stylistic equivalent is functional equivalent of elements in both original and translation aiming at the expressive identity with an invariant of identical meaning. And the last is textual synthematic equivalent. Textual equivalent is equivalence of the sigmatic structure of the text. And next is Eugenida distinguish two types of equivalence, formal and dynamic. First is formal equivalence. Formal equivalence focus attention on the message itself in both form and content. Second is dynamic equivalent. Dynamic equivalent is based on the principle of equivalent effect. In trying to solve the problem of translation equivalent, according to Naubert, translation equivalent must be considered a semiotic category comprising a syntactic, semantic, and pragmatic component. And next is common mistake in translation. First, the translator leaves out some of the text that appear in the source document, such as paragraph, sentence, a phrase, or an item in a list that does not require translation, such as telephone number. Second, the translator misinterprets the meaning of the text, and the final translation gives the wrong message. And the third is the translator incorrectly identifies abbreviations or misinterprets specific terminology. Fourth, the translator includes text or examples that are culturally inappropriate for the intended audience. Fifth, the translator is inconsistent in using or defining key words or phrases throughout the document or across different documents that are part of the same body of work. And the last is the client accepts change to the translator to the translation offered by equivalent and Hawk reviewers. There are some translation problem and solution. First is titles. Literal translations of title will often fail to grab the prospective audience for the book. The title is a commercial decision on which the publisher will have the final say, but creating a brand new title in order to avoid alienating readers is not good practice. Second is stylizing language. Translating a book written in a particular style, baroque for example, even when written by contemporary authors, poses its own problems. Other stylistic problem can be presented by purposeful awkwardness in the original that simply does not work in the new language. You can try to convey the sense of awkwardness in other ways by subtly referring to it. for instance, or moving direct dialogue into indirect. Third is regional dialects. The rhythms and patterns of their own language are part of what makes them interesting, and it can be a mistake to iron them out completely. While leaving too many unknown cultural references will weaken a book and lose readers, there must still be an essence of something different. Some languages need lengthy explanations which can be cumbersome and force the translator to rely on glossarials and notes in order to provide the necessary explanation. Fourth is strong language. Expletives that are integral to a book should always remain in many English-speaking countries. Bad language is considered to be less acceptable, and gratitude swearing may be frowned upon. Martin Riker notes that often a translator will clean up the strong language in the original without even realizing, simply because he or she is not comfortable with it, even though the original reader was. This happens more often than one would expect, and translators tend to realize it only after an editor has pointed it out. Next is colloquialism. Martin Riker says that the most important issue with slang is timeliness. Looking for a translator who was sensitive to the cultural and colloquial difference can help to employ a second translator with a good working knowledge of colloquialism, dialect, and slang in the native country, who can get across their meaning and help to come up with English equivalents that are appropriate. Do not jar with the reader, and most importantly, do not dead. Next is humor. Just slang or colloquialism often fail to translate, so humor can present a problem for translator. The translator and editor might have to decide which is more important to the passage, the literal sense of the phrases or the playfulness that it brings to bear. Next is untranslatable words and culture-specific references. Editor has to assume the position of the reader and should consider the overall experience of reading the original and how best to approximate the experience of readers in English. The next is questions from other sources. Note should be made of any other sources from which translation are taken in and given to the copy editor along with the translator note. And the last is difficult language. There are some language for which high quality translators are few and far between, forcing publisher either to abandon the idea of translating or to rely on the joint effort of a prose stylist and a native speaker to get the balance right. It may also be necessary to translate from a separate language altogether, because a good native translator simply cannot be found. I think that's all for me. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.